Hello students, welcome to the channel. In this video, we will look at the first reading passage of the December 2019 ACT Form C03. So let's begin. Literary narrative. This passage is adapted from the novel Love Marriage by V. Ganeshatnand. He met her, my mother, in New York City, and the heart said plaintively, thump, thump, thump. That was not the sound of illness. Theirs was an auspicious meeting, although no one had troubled to check the alignment of the stars. The young woman was 27, old for a prospective bride, but she did not look it. She had a generous face, he said to himself. He liked her glossy sheaf of dark hair, her sparse brows, her pronounced chin, her full lower lip. She smiled with her mouth closed because she did not like her teeth. He could already see within the structure of her face how she would become thinner, that her bones would give her older face a certain elegance, a chiseled and austere severity. He liked her precision in even the smallest of tasks, like arranging hibiscus in a vase, her reserve, her inability to say anything truly personal in public. He thought she might be full of secrets and wanted to know them. She never raised her voice, but she did not speak softly. How are you? That's a beautiful sari. How are the children? I like this rice. She liked her food steaming and spicy, as he did. She made her own clothes, staying up late into the night, her foot on the pedal of a sewing machine that had belonged to her mother and had crossed the ocean with her. Her hemline suited both the times and her young, pale slimness, which reminded him of a flowering tree by his home in Jaffna. He never caught her admitting she was wrong. Her words clambered around that possibility, but so sheepishly that he found it endearing. In a noisy room, he learned to tell the clear bell sound of her bangles apart from the rest. So the first two paragraphs are about a young couple from Sri Lanka who meet in New York City, and the perspective is the man's. The man falls in love with her immediately. The first line tells us that when he met her, his heart went thump, 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 and his heart was beating so fast that it could only be an indicator of first love. And the second paragraph describes the woman again from the man's perspective. There are these little details that the passage gives us: how she spoke, how she dressed, how she looked. And those tell us that the man is slowly falling in love with the woman. Suddenly, he was no longer thinking about widows or about repeating his own father's collapse. It was as though an invisible conductor was directing the pulling of strings to draw them together. Whether it was Murli who managed to get introduced to Vani or the other way around, no one else really remembers. And they will never admit which one of them was responsible. And yet it was this simple. A friend of his noticed that they were staying near each other. Perhaps Murli could give Vani a ride home. Yes, yes, two heads nodded. They left the party they were at too quickly to say all their goodbyes. After the door closed behind them, the space where they had been was filled with the laughter of friends. He took her home. She boarded with her family in Brooklyn. During the car ride, they were silent. It was a strange and comfortable silence for two people who had waited for so long to be alone. The thrum of the motor was loud because the car was old. When they turned around the corner, he pulled over and turned the engine off, and there was a quiet as loud as the motor had been. He walked her to her door and she thanked him. She did not ask him in for a cup of coffee. It was not her house, but it was out of his way and both of them knew it. She forgot that she did not like her teeth and bared them at him. Her smile for once was not self-conscious. She watched him drive away, waving from the window. The Sri Lankan elders of New York City were all too eager to play parents to the couple. She was proper, smart and polite, and a good cook and lovely. Vani had a job, and more important than any of these things, she had grace, which was something that could not be taught. Murli, of course, was the beloved parentless boy, their favorite bachelor doctor, whom they took into their homes and bosoms and tried to smother with welcome and curry. Occasions were arranged. Even the very rooms seemed to conspire to make the two end up next to each other. And then one day something was suggested by one of those elders, and somehow the pair of them were talking about it to each other directly, which was a faux pas, but neither of them minded. Oceans away, families exploded. True to form, his family's discord faded quickly, but her family almost did not consent. Afraid of the improper, they questioned his intentions, his failure to observe certain formalities, his ancestry, his habits, and his character. He heard about what they had said and turned to her, his eyes full of questions. They may not know these things about you, she said, but I do. Are you sure? He asked her, the unsaid. They may not forgive you for this. Positive, she answered. Countries away, Vani's brother crashed into Murli's brother's house yelling, who is this doctor who wants to marry my sister? Who is this doctor who is in love with my sister? The nerve of Murli, they thought, in love. These were not words they were used to sing. So the first half of the passage kind of charts their love story in New York. And you know how even though it was midwifed by others, it became this organic, beautiful romance. And especially this scene, where they leave the party and, they spend some time together for the first time without other people present. And then the passage moves to the social ramifications of their coming together, especially back home in Sri Lanka, right? There were questions asked about Murali's background. The girl's parents, the girl's family, Vani's family, was not sure that everything was okay. And then there was this little incident that happens towards the end where Vani's brother crashes into Murli's brother's house. And, the idea that they fell in love was something that the brother did not accept because, one, they had not known who he was. We also know from the passage that he was parentless. So that was like another aspect that they probably were uncomfortable about. And yeah, so that's what the passage says. Question 1, the third paragraph marks a shift from the second paragraph's focus on Murali's impressions of Vani to the rest of the passage's focus on. So this paragraph, right? Suddenly he was no longer thinking about widows or about repeating his own father's collapse. So the, the passage moves from Murli's impressions of Vani in the second paragraph to kind of their blossoming romance, right? So let's see. Murli's life as a married man, Murli's concerns about marriage, Murli and Vani's courtship and its effects on others, Murli's characteristics and his family conflicts. So it's C, right? It's about their courtship and how that courtship affects others, both in New York and far away in Sri Lanka. Details in the second paragraph primarily characterize Vani as, so this paragraph, right? What do we learn about Vani from this paragraph? So let's look at the options. Reserved but self-assured, severe and impolite, intelligent and apologetic, beautiful but unkempt. So I think it's reserved but self-assured. How do we know that? Because she never raised her voice, but she did not speak softly. She liked her food steaming and spicy as he did. She made her own clothes. He never caught her admitting she was wrong, right? So this tells me that she was self-assured. Her words clambered around that possibility, but so sheepishly that he found it endearing. So she was reserved. She obviously was not somebody who was very gregarious or friendly, but at the same time, she was self-assured. Which of the following events mentioned in the passage occurred first chronologically? The elders organized occasions in which Vani and Murli would be together. A friend suggested that Murli drive Vani home. Vani smiled at Murli without thinking about her teeth. Vani's brother burst into Murli's brother's home. So the option B happened first, right? When the friend suggested that Murli drive her home, then Murli did drive her home, and it was when he dropped her that she smiled at him. So that was the second event. And then the elders started conspiring to bring them together in New York. And finally, the brother's incident, right? So the first is option B. As it is presented in the passage, the italicized portion, how are you? That's a beautiful sari. How are the children? I like this rice. Most likely indicates. So this comes here. She never raised her voice, but she did not speak softly. How are you? That's a beautiful sari. How are the children? I like this rice. So these are kind of the messages or the words that they shared, right? When they met. So the types of pleasantries that Murli would prepare in his head before meeting someone new, parts of a conversation between Murli and Vani when they were first introduced, comments typical of the kind that Vani would make when in public, secret thoughts that Murli imagined Vani to be thinking. Okay, so it's not F because it's not about meeting someone new. It's about Vani specifically, and it's not J. These are not secret thoughts. Okay, what about, so when we say, yeah, she never raised her voice. So this is Vani's comments, right? So yeah, so I don't think it's about when they were first introduced. It's the comments typical of Vani when she's in public. Okay, according to the passage, one similarity between Murli and Vani is that both enjoy eating spicy food, were born in New York City, had a passion for cooking, worked at a medical clinic. So I think it's the first option, right? She liked her food spicy as he did. So they both enjoyed eating spicy food. In the context of the passage, the statement, and they will never admit which one of them was responsible, more strongly suggests that. So this is here, they will never admit which one of them was responsible. That is to say, who started the process, right? Who was it that proposed to the other? Neither Murli nor Vani remembers who first sought to be introduced. Each of Murli's and Vani's friends claim to have been the one who introduced the two of them. Murli initiated contact with Vani, though he would stubbornly deny. Both Murli and Vani refused to confess to initiating their introduction to each other. So it says, whether it was Murli who managed to get introduced or the other way around, no one remembers, and they will never admit. So this has to do with the fact that they would never admit. So they know, but they would never admit that. So it would be J. They refuse to confess to initiating their introduction to each other. In the passage, the narrator makes clear that Vani didn't ask Murli in for coffee because Vani felt extremely self-conscious in Murli's presence, did not want to invite Murli into somebody else's house, right? It's given right here that she did not ask him in for a cup of coffee. It was not her house. The passage indicates that the description of Vani in line 61 to 65 most closely reflects the perspective of 61 to 65. She was proper, smart, and polite. So this is the Sri Lankan elders, right? What they think of her. So it's the Sri Lankan elders in New York City. It can reasonably be inferred from the passage that by traditional standards, the Sri Lankan community would have considered Murli and Vani's direct discussion of the marriage to be unconventional, right? Because this is, see, and then one day something was suggested and somehow the pair of them were talking about it to each other directly, which was a faux pas. The faux pas as in, which was basically a social mistake, something that goes against convention. The fact that, they were directly talking about marriage, that wasn't something that was done traditionally in Sri Lanka. It's generally initiated by the family. So this is unconventional. As used in line 79, the word observe most nearly means his failure to observe certain formalities, his ancestry. So his failure to observe, to follow certain traditions, to follow, right? Because you're trying to say that Murli didn't really follow the conventional traditions that were followed back home in Sri Lanka, right? So it's about following those traditions, following those formalities. Okay, so that was the first passage. Let's grade this. We'll go to the answer key for reading 1 to 10. Yeah, CFBHA, CFBHA. Okay, let's look at the next one. JBJDG, JBJDG. Okay, great. So we got all correct. So this was the first passage of the reading section of Form 03. I'll be solving the other 3 passages one by one. So make sure you come back later for those. Take care. Bye-bye.